If you want to follow along this morning, I'm in Ephesians chapter 6, or the first verse. Ephesians chapter 6. I mean, while you're getting there, we found out something this morning that I thought was very interesting, is that Stouter will steal from his children. I mean, I wish you'd all would really start praying for his soul. I mean, I think that's what it is. Ephesians chapter 6. Last week we talked about, as we worked through Ephesians, this whole idea, or not idea, but Paul beginning to address those relationships that we are in. And he took one verse and he addressed those relationships that just basically deal with everybody. And then he talked to husbands, and then he talked to wives, and he's doing this thing because the marriage covenant is representative of our relationship with Christ, exactly what he did. And in chapter 6, we have even more of that continuing. I named today's message, And There's More, because we talked about people, we talked about husbands, we talked about wives. And I think that the reason that he includes this particular thing, because relationships are sometimes difficult. Would you agree with me? I mean, whether it's a marriage relationship, whether it's a relationship that you may be in, a dating type thing, whether it's a relationship with a coworker or a friend, whether it's a relationship with your boss, relationship with your kids, relationships can be one of the most rewarding things that you have, and they can also be one of the most frustrating things that you will experience. It's just sort of what it is about doing this thing that we call life. And I was reminded of that this week as I was, I have a couple personal trainers, and I was working with them on some things this week. And one, by the relationship's really good. I really, really like him. This is on the CrossFit side of it. I mean, I think Seth is a wonderful guy until he gets that workout of the day out for me. And I get about halfway through that, and I have a confession. I hate this man. I mean, it is painful, but we get through it and everything works. Now, on the other hand, Tyler, really good guy. I've worked with him a lot. We're working on some other stuff. And Tyler just takes a different approach. It's not as intense. It's just the steady plodding. And I really, really enjoy that. But I got to spend some time with both of them this week and develop that even more. And I think what Ephesians does is says, when we spend time with people, work on these things. In other words, this is your focus, whether we're talking about your husband, your wife, your friend, your neighbor, your kids, whatever it is may be, take a look. So let's take a look, because there is more in verse 1 of chapter 6. It says this, Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord. Now notice he gives the reason why you're supposed to do this. It just isn't this flat statement. I mean, how many moms out there have said this to their kids when a kid said why? Has any moms had the kids say why? How many of you said this? Because of mom. I don't have to give an explanation because I'm mom. Dads have done the same thing. We've done it. But Paul here, he wants us because it's all relational. He wants us to know the why here, because we belong to the Lord. And what that suggests is because we belong to the Lord, we will be doing this as a child. Now, most of the time we read this, we're thinking of the little ones, and they are awesome. But think of yourself as a child today. For this is the right thing to do. Verse 2. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will live a long life on earth. Now, it's a little bit different than what we read in Exodus chapter 20, where the commandment there that Moses got on Mount Sinai, it says something like this. It says that, so things will go well with you when you get to the land that I have promised. In other words, you're going to live long there. Things will go well with you. See, when we honor our mother and father, things just simply go better for us. But you might be saying, and there are people out there, you have no idea. My mother and father aren't honorable. My mother and father did this. My mother and father did that. And you might even be one of those people that said, I had no mom or dad, or I had no mom and dad. They left me. There are people in our midst who live a life like that. And so whether your parent's honorable or unhonorable, let's take a look at the ways in which we can honor the less than unhonorable. Because I'll be a little bit transparent here. I haven't always been the honorable parent. At times I experienced some impatience with my children. Sometimes my voice would get a little gruff. Sometimes I worked a little bit more than I should. And the Lord corrected all of those things. But we need to remember, as parents, we are not perfect, and we can't expect our children to be perfect either. There has to be this little grace and mercy, this give and take. But how is it that we can do that? Because we can do this whether they're less than honorable or you have the best parents in the world. How is it that we do that? Number one, pray for them. Pray for them. And if you don't know where to start, pray that prayer. Because interestingly, God makes a provision about this when he says this. He says, when we don't know what to pray for or how to pray, the Spirit within us groans out to God. Isn't that a beautiful thing? That you have something you just don't know how to pray about. Maybe your childhood was so painful. And maybe your adulthood has been painful because mom or dad or both are still less than honorable. And you are hurting and you have no idea how to pray for them. The beautiful thing is you start at your spirit. Praise to God until you can get to a point. And there's nothing wrong with just saying this, Lord, I pray for mom. Lord, I pray for dad. And let God take care of everything. And then if there's specific things that you need to pray for, then pray for them as well. But that is where you have to start. You have to start by simply praying for them. Do you realize that praying for them is never going to hurt you? Maybe mom and dad's been hurt. Maybe you've been hurt by mom and dad. And a lot of people have. But praying for them will never hurt you. Never. Number two, and these aren't necessarily in the order of importance, but I would say this is, along with praying, one of the most important. Forgive them. Forgive them. This doesn't mean you have to hang out for them forever, and I can do a sermon on forgiveness and what that might look like at some other point, but forgive them. Because the simple thing is this, is that no parent is perfect. Even the perfect parents are not perfect. And when we realize that, and we realize that our children are not perfect, our friends are not perfect, our associates and our acquaintances are not perfect, life goes so much better. But forgive them. Let God deal with what they have done or what they didn't do. Forgive them. And sometimes forgiveness is really hard. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, you forgive them, you say that word, but your heart's not really feeling it. And then all of a sudden your mind begins working and you begin bringing up all these things that you shouldn't forgive them for again. Do it all over again. Do it all over again until you get it. Work with God until you get it. That's the key. Consistency. Work with God until you get it. I remember having to go to rehab after my heart attack, and I mean they Janice laughs. We had to do an intervention for me because they took my car away. I jumped on the bike. No, that I guess you don't do that anyway. But I went in there. I consider myself a young man. I mean, I'm still relatively young compared to some of you. But anyway, I go in there, and the first workout they gave me, I laughed. First workout, 4 minutes on a Schwinn Aerodyne, 4 minutes on a treadmill, 4 minutes on elliptical. No problem. I'm a young man. I can handle this. I remember being a minute into the Aerodyne thinking I was going to die. That's how much it took out of you. The treadmill was the easiest because I can walk forever. And I'd never been on elliptical. It didn't even make it a minute. And yet now, because you keep doing it, it hurts, but you keep doing it. Your mind's saying, quit, it keeps doing it. Even if you get to the point you say, Lord, I want to die. You keep doing it. And now, an elliptical, I don't know how long I could go, but way past 30 seconds. Treadmill I could stay on for hours, get me some earbuds and some good music. I just go. Schwinn Airdyne, haven't been on one since. Hate those things. No, I take that back. I've been on one once because my CrossFit guy put me on it. Oh, that was a hate moment too. But I repented, so I'm okay. Keep at it, the forgiveness, because it's so important. Because unforgiveness will eat you up. It will make you bitter. It will make you cynical. It will make you a lot of things that you don't want to be. So if you don't get it the first time, or it only lasts a couple minutes, then do it all over again. Forgive them again until you got it. Number three. And there's a bunch of them I could have wrote. These are just what I wrote. How to honor the less than honorable. Number one, don't blame them for all your problems. Don't blame mom and dad for all your problems. Now, a couple weeks ago, I said the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I get all that. But there comes in a point when we are adults that we need to take responsibility and not say, I do that because mom did this, or I do that because dad did this, or I do that because they didn't do this, or I do that because they didn't do that. That all may be true. But quit making the excuse. And be the person that God called you to be. Be the person God designed you to be. Be the person that his word tells us to be through his Spirit. I mean, that's one of the most beautiful promises we have. Jesus says this, I got to go to heaven. I got to go to heaven. So what? The Comforter will come who will teach you all things. If we don't let the Comforter teach us all things, what we're doing is let some of those negative things and those bad things teach us and take control of our lives when Jesus Christ wants control of our life. Who is the Lord of your life? Is it Jesus Christ, or is it something mom and dad did 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, 90 years ago? Own it. It happened. But it doesn't define you. Jesus Christ defines you. Don't blame them for all your problems. And then another one I just put down there, that you can honor them if they're less than honorable, if they're more than honorable, whatever. This one would be universal, is don't speak ill of them. As much as you'd like to, as much as you'd love to shove that knife in, don't speak ill of them. Just remember this. There's no perfect parent. There's no perfect kid. And Jesus Christ died for imperfect people. Just as he died for you and forgave you on the cross, he too died for them and forgave them on the cross. Now, whether they've made a relationship with them, that's up to them. You worry about your relationship with God, because your audience is one. So we can't do that. We can't honor the less than honorable by praying for them, by forgiving them, for not blaming them for all the problems that we have, and not speaking ill of them. And then he transitions. He wants to talk to dads now, fathers. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way that you treat them. Verse 4 is where I'm at. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Now, in most translations, you have two words here that's used for the Greek word there. You'll have the word provoke, which is in this particular translation. In the NIV, you'll have this word exasperate. And I sort of like that word there, because your Greek word's there. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it. But in this particular case, he's telling dads this. Don't lead them to the point where you're going to rouse wrath. That's the picture. Don't lead them to the point where they are going to be so angry that they'll be wrathful. That's how. Because it says to discipline our children, and it says to instruct our children, but do not do it in such a way that you're going to rouse that wrath, whether at you, as from a father, at mom, at brothers and sisters, anywhere. Don't rouse the wrath. It does not mean that your child may not be angry. And it does not mean your child may not rebel against you a little bit in that moment. What it means is to rouse that wrath where they'll follow through on that anger. And unfortunately, a lot of times that happens because all of us, well, most of us have parents have used this. We don't have to give our kids an explanation. We say it's because I'm dad. Suck it up. Or I'm mom. Suck it up. And believe me, those are good enough excuses. I've had children. But love says this. I'm going to share with you why. I'm going to share with you why. And if parents, we remain calm, even if adults, and we do things in a responsible manner, we are teaching them because they mimic and they learn our behavior. Even as they're growing, they mimic and learn that. Wonderful experience with Parker last week, and if you ever tell her I shared this story when she gets older, I'll deny it. But we had to get after her, right? Now, Grandpa doesn't get after her. She loves Grandpa. She can do anything. That's a really cool thing about being a grandparent. But anyway, my son told her no. And she just looked at him. And she just looked back at him again. And then she very gently got herself down on the floor and very gently laid on her back so she wouldn't hit her head. And then all of a sudden just started learned behavior. Somewhere she saw that and she was mimicking what she saw. Of course, she didn't understand the response because I'm laughing, Janice is laughing, Nathan is laughing. But she got right back up and we went at it again. But even our children can learn from us. So don't exaggerate. Don't rouse the wrath in our children by the way that we discipline, but instruct them that what comes from the Lord. And that includes that love and grace and mercy because children aren't perfect, parents aren't perfect, and we really, really need to remember that. And then in verse 5, talking about this other relationship, now Paul uses these words, slaves and masters, and on your insert I put, try these words, employer and employee. Because interestingly, slavery at that time was a little bit different than maybe the slavery that we talk about, that occurred, 400 years ago, 200 years ago. In that these slaves had some rights. They had more freedoms. They could come and go. And in ancient slavery, at least in this time where he's writing these, was a lot different. They were still owned, don't get me wrong. But they had a lot more freedoms. So think of this in terms of your employer, because to a certain extent, I won't say that our employers own us, not in the sense that we own other people, but in the sense they do. I mean, we don't show up for work, we don't make money. I mean, in the sense they do. So let's look at it. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. Try to please them all the time, just not when they're watching you. As slaves of Christ, do the will of God with all your heart. So what he's talking about here is doing the will of God in the context of our work relationships. And whether we're working, whether we're retired, we all still are involved in doing some type of work with other people. Work with enthusiasm, although you are working for the Lord rather than people. Remember that the Lord will reward each one of us for the good we do, whether we are slaves or free. And masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Don't threaten them. Remember, you both have the same master in heaven, and he has no favorites. So when we think about those people that we're working for, or even take it one step farther, the people that we're working with, we serve them with deep respect and fear. And it says in verse 9, masters, do the same. If you employ people or in some hierarchical system have people underneath you, then what? Oh, serve them with deep respect. I mean, have you ever had a boss that didn't respect you? I mean, I have. Not here. You guys are awesome. But I remember it coming in night after night, half lit. I don't know why I don't hire a bunch of monkeys so they could do it. Night after night. I was young and dumb. I sort of organized. He came in, we said that, and we said, hire monkeys. We walked out for the night. Deep respect. Whether you're working for somebody or whether you're overseeing somebody, deep respect. Serve them. Serve them. Our employers we are to serve, but also it says, masters, treat your slaves in the same way. If you employ people or have somebody in your hierarchy, serve them. It's countercultural. It's counterworldly. Do not be conformed by the patterns of this world is what the Bible says. Serve them. It may look a little bit different than the way that they serve you, but serve them. Try to please them all the time. Not in this mentality of being a people pleaser because that takes you down a road you don't want to go, but in the sense of being obedient to the Word of God. Please them. Do what you can to make them happy as slaves for Christ and do it all the time, just not when they're watching you. Work with enthusiasm. I mean, there's nothing more contagious than being excited about what you are doing. Are you excited about what you do? No, not really. Then try to get excited. Because there is something in there to get excited about. Now, I can't tell you the name of the movie. I mean, many of you guys have watched film, and I can't even tell you who was in it. But a line always comes to my mind. It was a baseball player, and he's going through a really dark time in his life. And he walks into the locker room one day, and he looks at his friend, and he says, you know what we get to do today? We get to play baseball. How many of us get up on a Sunday morning, a Monday morning, a Tuesday morning, so on, a Friday morning, a Saturday morning. I get to serve Jesus today. So when I go to work, I am going to be enthusiastic about it. When I come to a worship service, I'm going to be enthusiastic about it. When I show up at the saddle barn, I don't really want to be there. I'm going to be enthusiastic about it. Believe me, the people around you won't care if you're faking it. Because you're enthusiastic. Be enthusiastic about your work, about those people underneath you. Be enthusiastic about your service to the Lord. Remember that the Lord will reward each one of us for the good that we do. There's a reward coming from this. A reward. Whether we are slaves or free. And masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Don't threaten them. Remember, you have the same master in heaven. Both have the same master in heaven. And he has no favorites. He has no favorites. So we look at our relationships as LaDonna comes up and today we talked about children and we talked about dads and we talked about what we're supposed to do at work. I just want to go back to that honorable or less than honorable thing, because these are 4 things that we can do for anybody. This number 1, pray for the people around you. Pray for those people that you are in relationships with. And if you can't pray but desire to pray, know that your Spirit's praying. Know that your Spirit's praying. And then start out with a simple prayer. Just say, I pray for, and say their name. Second thing we can do is forgive them. Forgive them. Right before I walked out, I saw a little post there that said, I wasted so much time in my life on nonsense. Unforgiveness is nonsense. Let it go. And if you take it back in 5 minutes, let it go again. And if you take it back in 10 minutes, let it go again. But keep at it. Keep at it. whomever it may be, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, whoever it is, quit blaming others for your problems. Rely on God. And then don't speak ill of them. Don't speak.